I spent 7 years building that department from the ground up. 7 years of late nights, missed dinners, and personal sacrifices. And when the director position finally opened up, my boss looked me dead in the eyes and told me the job was going to his 24-year-old nephew, who had never worked a day in corporate in his entire life. What happened over the next 6 months? Destroyed everything. Before I tell you this story, if you love workplace drama and injustice, hit that subscribe button and drop a like right now. Trust me, you're going to want to hear how this one ends. And let me know in the comments, have you ever been passed over for someone completely unqualified? I want to hear your stories. Let me take you back to where it all began. I started at Meridian Financial Solutions in January of 2016 as a junior data analyst. Fresh out of my master's program, hungry to prove myself, and willing to do whatever it took to climb the ladder. The company was mid-sized, about 400 employees, specializing in financial consulting for manufacturing companies. When I joined, the analytics department was a mess. We had outdated systems, no standardized processes, and a turnover rate that would make your head spin. Within my first year, I had already started making changes. I remember staying until midnight, sometimes later, rebuilding our entire reporting infrastructure. I created training manuals, developed new client dashboards, and slowly but surely transformed that department into something the company could actually be proud of. By year 3, I was promoted to senior analyst. By year 5, I became the assistant director, essentially running the day-to-day operations while our director, a kind but aging man named Gerald, focused on the administrative side. Gerald was 62, counting down the days to retirement, and everyone knew it. Everyone also knew who his successor would be. Me. Or so I thought. The company's CEO was a man named Richard Holloway. Richard was old money, third generation in finance, and had the kind of smile that never quite reached his eyes. He and I had a cordial relationship, nothing warm but professional. He would nod at me in the hallways, occasionally compliment our department's quarterly numbers, and that was about it. What I didn't know, what nobody told me, was that Richard had a sister, and that sister had a son named Brandon Holloway Mitchell. 24 years old, fresh off a 2-year stint finding himself in Europe after barely graduating with a communications degree. No corporate experience, no analytics background, no understanding of what our department even did. Gerald announced his retirement in March of 2023. The email went out on a Tuesday morning, and by Tuesday afternoon, I had already drafted my application for the director position. I had references, a 5-year growth plan for the department, and letters of support from 3 of our biggest clients. I was ready. The interview process was supposed to take 2 weeks. They brought in external candidates, which I expected. They had me do a presentation on department vision, which I nailed. My manager, the VP of operations named Sandra Chen, pulled me aside after my interview and told me it was essentially a formality. "The job is yours," she said. "Just don't do anything crazy between now and the announcement." The announcement came on a Friday, but it wasn't my name on that email. "We are pleased to announce that Brandon Holloway Mitchell will be joining Meridian Financial Solutions as the new Director of Data Analytics." I read that sentence 4 times before it registered. Director of my department. A man I had never met, never heard of, was about to become my boss.
I marched straight to Sandra's office. She wouldn't look me in the eye. "It came from above," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Richard made the call himself. There was nothing I could do." Nothing she could do? I had given this company 7 years of my life. I had built that department with my own 2 hands. And now I was supposed to report to some trust fund kid whose only qualification was sharing DNA with the CEO? I wanted to quit right then and there. My wife, Elena, talked me off the ledge that night. "Give it a chance," she said, rubbing my shoulders as I stared blankly at our living room wall. "Maybe he'll surprise you. Maybe he'll actually be decent." He was not decent. He was a disaster. Brandon's first day was the Monday after the announcement. He showed up at 11 a.m., 2 hours late, wearing designer jeans in a blazer that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. He had this permanent smirk on his face, like he knew something the rest of us didn't, like he was in on a joke we weren't smart enough to understand. "So," he said, plopping down in what used to be Gerald's chair, "walk me through what you guys actually do here." You guys. Not we. You guys. Like he wasn't even part of the team he was supposed to be leading. I spent the first week giving him crash courses on our systems, our clients, our processes. He nodded along, occasionally checking his phone, asking questions that made it painfully clear he had no idea what data analytics even meant. At one point, he asked me what the difference was between a spreadsheet and a database. I am not exaggerating. By week 2, he started making changes. Not improvements, mind you. Changes for the sake of changes. He wanted to modernize the workflow, which apparently meant replacing our proven project management system with some trendy app his friend had developed. The app crashed constantly. We lost 3 days of work. Brandon blamed IT. Then came the client meetings. Our biggest account, a manufacturing conglomerate called Sterling Industries, had a quarterly review scheduled for late April. I had handled these meetings for years. I knew their data inside and out, had built personal relationships with their executives. Brandon insisted on leading the presentation. It was a massacre. He mispronounced the CEO's name twice. He presented last quarter's numbers instead of the current ones. When they asked about projected growth metrics, he froze, looked at me, and said, "My associate can handle the technical stuff." His associate. I had been working with Sterling for 5 years, and now I was his associate? We didn't lose Sterling that day, but the damage was done. Their CEO called Sandra directly to complain. Nothing happened to Brandon. Of course nothing happened. The team started falling apart. My colleague Maria, who had been with the company for 4 years, put in her notice after Brandon publicly criticized her work in a team meeting. The criticism was wrong, by the way. He had misread the report entirely, but when Maria tried to explain, he cut her off and told her to take ownership of her mistakes. She was gone within 2 weeks. Then David left. Then Priya. Then Priya. Then our newest hire, a brilliant kid named Marcus who had so much potential. One by one, the team I had built, the people I had trained, walked out the door. And every time, Brandon would shrug and say, "If they can't handle a real corporate environment, that's on them." I started documenting everything. Every bad decision, every failed project, every client complaint. I kept a file on my personal computer, meticulously dated and organized. Elena asked me once what I was doing. "Building a case," I told her. "For what?" she asked. I didn't have an answer yet, but I knew something would happen eventually. It had to. The breaking point came in September. 6 months into Brandon's reign of incompetence, we had a major project deadline for a new client, a regional bank that had specifically requested our services based on our reputation. The contract was worth $2.3 million. Brandon had ignored every timeline I set, overruled every resource allocation I suggested, and spent more time planning his team-building retreat than actually working. The night before the deadline, I was in the office until 2 a.m., desperately trying to finish the deliverables. Brandon had left at 5, mentioning something about a dinner reservation. I called him at midnight, begging for help, and he didn't answer. I called again at 1. Nothing. We missed the deadline. The bank threatened to pull the contract entirely, and when Richard Holloway called an emergency meeting to discuss the failure, Brandon threw me under the bus. "The problem," Brandon said, sitting there in his perfectly pressed suit, "is that my team isn't performing at the level I need. Specifically, my assistant director seems to have difficulty meeting basic expectations." I saw red. 7 years of loyalty, 7 years of sacrifice, and this man, this incompetent, unqualified man, was blaming me for his failures. "With all due respect," I said, my voice shaking, "the project failed because leadership ignored every timeline and resource request I submitted. I have documentation, emails, meeting notes. If this board would like to review them, I'm happy to provide everything." The room went silent. Richard's face turned a shade of purple I didn't know was possible. Brandon's smirk finally disappeared. Sandra spoke up. Quiet, careful Sandra, who had been watching this disaster unfold for months. "I think," she said slowly, "that we should take Marcus up on his offer. I'd like to see that documentation." I sent the file that night. 300 pages of incompetence, nepotism, and corporate negligence. Every missed meeting, every ignored warning, every decision that Brandon had made against professional advice. The investigation took 2 weeks. Brandon was reassigned to a special project, which everyone knew meant he was being quietly pushed out. He lasted another month before resigning to pursue entrepreneurial opportunities. Code for, my uncle couldn't protect me anymore. And me,
I got the director position. Finally, it came with a formal apology from Sandra, a significant raise, and the authority to rebuild my team the right way. I had Maria back, and David. Even Marcus came back after I called him personally and explained what happened. It took months to undo the damage Brandon had caused, but we did it. We won back Sterling's full confidence. We salvaged the bank contract, and our department became stronger than ever. The lesson I learned from all of this: document everything. Protect yourself. Because in the corporate world, loyalty doesn't always protect you, but evidence does. And sometimes justice does happen. You just have to fight for it. Thank you so much for listening to my story all the way to the end. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more workplace stories just like this one. And if you have your own nightmare boss story, your own tale of workplace injustice, drop it in the comments or send it to us. Your story could be featured in our next video. Until next time, stay strong out there. You deserve better.